Hello, BookTube. I was watching a video on Jonathan Cohen's channel recently. I'll leave a link to it down below. It was called My Philosophy of Book Reviews. Of course, it attracted my attention. And he goes over his philosophy, his approach to reviewing books. He goes over the general structure first, and then the more of the philosophy. When it comes to general structure, he very interestingly mentions that he views written reviews and video reviews very differently. When it's a written review, he likes it to be longer than 300 words, but shorter than 1,000 words to guarantee that people are paying attention the whole time. Whereas for a video, basically sort of parallel, longer than 5 minutes, but fewer than 15 minutes for a review. And also in terms of structure, he in his video, he addresses the question of spoilers. Which is a much vexed topic that I've brought up many times myself. And then he went on to his philosophy. Never attack the author personally. Concentrate on the book instead. Never attack the reader or the audience personally for the book. Quote someone, I forget who he said it was, saying every book is someone's first book and every book is someone's favorite book. So tread lightly, act accordingly. Mentioned being fair in his reviews, which if you've watched his channel will not come as a big surprise. But also in context of his channel mentioned that there is an element of fairness because his channel has grown. He had more and more contact with authors, more and more contact with publishers and publicists. And as a result of that, he has developed relationships. So sometimes he doesn't want to hurt the feelings of the people involved, and certainly doesn't want to hurt the book. It doesn't want to hurt the book's prospects. If it's a self-published or an indie-published author, he doesn't want them damaged by maybe negative comments that he might make. He mentioned that a video review has to be more concise and more pointed, whereas a written review can be a little more rambling. I don't think that was meant as the offhand insult that I naturally took it as. But if you're writing a good written book review, it won't be pointlessly rambling. but listening to him say all of these things about the structure of reviews and also the philosophy of reviews naturally made me want to rehash the ground myself. I am a book reviewer by trade. That's what I do. So. And I don't do book reviews on this channel. I don't do video book reviews at all. So it's a weird combination of similarities and differences. So I wanted to go over my own view of structures and philosophies and chat just a little bit about it. Like, for instance, for structure, since I don't do video reviews of books, it's only written reviews. And for me, I agree that you don't want to ramble on pointlessly too long. I try to set my reviews at around 800 words. I don't have to. Most of the venues that I write for would be perfectly happy with more or less. And authors would be happy with anything. If you are, for instance, an indie or a self-published author, then you know the uphill battle of getting anyone to write about your book. So I tend to do in that area because I want to cover the basics. And I've found that you need a little bit of space to do that. A key basic being that you want to tell the reader about the book under review. Most reviewers, especially what I will call, without any animosity, just in terms of, dictionary definition, amateur reviewers. Most reviewers, though, it's not just amateurs, it's plenty of my professionals, my colleagues, stint this. They don't do a good job at this, or they do too much. Or their whole review is simply recounting what the book is about. No. That's a book report. But plenty of paid book reviewers do only that. They chime in with an evaluative word or two at the end. You'll see that in major publications, London Review of Books. But plenty of them skip in the other direction too, where they don't tell the reader what the book is about. They don't situate the reader before they start talking about the book. You have to do that. Otherwise, your review is all but useless. The last thing in the world you want to do is write a review that gives off the impression of, oh, you don't know? Oh, you're not in the in-group? Well, then I'm not writing for you. You can do that. Plenty of reviewers do. I know some that have made that a trend, a brand. But you're not helping the reader. if you do that. And the whole point of what you're doing, your whole duty is to help the reader. So I tend to go to 800 words because I want the freedom of 300 words to tell the reader what it is that I'm talking about. And then all that's left for me in a written review is to do what I said, to safeguard the reader. My whole goal is entertainingly, I hope, to tell them whether or not the book under review is worth their time, their attention, and their money. And in what ways it is, or in what ways it isn't. Here are things about it that probably would dissuade you from reading it. I am an advanced scout. I know the lay of the land. I know the inhabitants of the land, but I'm an advanced scout. I am not the owner of the land. I am not an authority on my own. I am relaying information back to people who aren't reading as much as I am, or as new as I am, or as fast as I am, and might want my advice on what's coming. There are two elements to that. One is that I have to be out there in advance. I have to be reading a lot. I cover that fairly well. And the other is that my advice has to be trustworthy, and that takes time. If you're especially a print reviewer, that takes time. You have to build up an audience who knows to trust you. They don't always have to agree with you, but they know to trust you. They know you're not going to be ill-informed, misinformed, uninformed. They know you're not going to be working off some sort of axe to grind or something like that. So they know all about that about you, and so they develop at a level of trust. I have that with plenty of reviewers who are working today. And I'm happy to say, or I'm flattered, I'm honored to know that a lot of my readers have that with me. That's terrific. And the only other element that connects with Jonathan's discussion is spoilers, which is a big deal. It's fetishized almost on sites like Goodreads. And I have in the past said, I still say, that if a book can actually be spoiled by you knowing some crucial plot twist at the end, if the book as an item, as an artistic creation can be spoiled by that, then either the book is really bad or you're a really weak or childish reader, one of the two. And I still stick to that. That is, I believe that is still true. But there's a joy on the reader's part in experiencing that kind of a twist, that kind of an unexpected tonal shift or something that the author has carefully crafted in order to produce that joy. Right? The author is not, these things aren't happening like meteorology. The author is making that happen. They are carefully crafting that in order to give that reader, among all the other joys that I'm hoping they've given the reader, the joy of, ooh, didn't see that coming. That's a legitimate joy. And since your whole duty as a reviewer is to your reader, well, you're being a right royal horrible person to take that joy away from them just for the fun of it. You are an advanced scout. You have the ability to ruin that little joy in the book's conclusion or the book's climax. And no, you have the ability to ruin it and no call to ruin it. There is no call to ruin it. If you are a book reviewer who thinks that you need to spoil a book in order to do your duty by the book, you're a bad book reviewer. Simple as that. I have known almost no examples where where talking about a spoiler at the end of the book was a legitimate thing for a reader to do. I always think about a book just a couple of years ago that gave me conniptions because it was the quintessence of that. It was a book called The Delivery by Peter Mendelsohn. And it has a thing at the end. A thing happens at the end, literally in the last 3 pages, that fundamentally changes the reading experience of the whole book. So it's not, it's not someone walks in a door and then the end to be continued and you wonder, oh my God, what's going to happen now? No, it's just a standalone book. But I fought with myself forever and ever about what to do there. Because on the one hand, I don't want to spoil the reader's experience of that incredible left curve change at the end. But on the other hand, I felt like I wanted to warn the reader that this is coming. And that, this is going to fundamentally change how you view the book, and maybe you don't want that. Maybe you don't want to invest the time in the book if that's what's going to happen at the end. Eventually, at first I thought, well, this is just insuperable. The only way is to just not talk about it at all. Let the reader fend for themselves. I eventually found a way to do that. And if I can do it with that book, then you can do it with any book. Ordinary spoilers. This was not an ordinary spoiler, but ordinary spoilers. If you, as a reviewer, feel that you have to reveal them, you're just being a jerk. That's all. You're not being a legitimate reviewer. So that was for spoilers, and that was for the structure of the thing. But then we move on to my philosophy, and I agree with Jonathan Koan that personal attacks on authors are beyond the pale. You absolutely shouldn't do them in a review, with one exception, which Jonathan did not do, because he doesn't, I don't think, review the kind of books where this would even come up, which is if the author is intentionally lying to the reader. If the author is intentionally lying to the reader, then you are perfectly justified. In fact, you're ethically bound to call them a liar, especially if they're trying to conceal their lies. Needless to say, in the era of Trump books, this has become absolute commonplace feature of the landscape, that a MAGA creature will write a book full of explicit, easily demonstrated lies. And you can't expect the reader to go herring after every one of those when it's so smoothly packaged for them. So you, as a reviewer, have to do it yourself. And if you catch a writer of such a book writing something that you know they know is false, what alternative do you have but to attack the author personally? You don't. I totally agree with Jonathan about his other point. You should never attack the reader. You should never say to the reader, "You're a fool to like this," even if you privately think it. Everybody has different tastes when it comes to what they like and don't like on the page. So I totally agree without that. Occasionally, it is necessary to attack the author if they're doing something wrong. Right? Just go to Regnery Press. Go to the website of Regnery Press, and you will see in their new and forthcoming titles a whole gigantic list of books for whom it will be necessary to attack the author. But then we get to a tricky part of Jonathan's video, the part of his video that I bridled at the most. That business about him wanting to be friendly with authors, wanting to, I've got a bigger footprint now for this channel. I want it to get even bigger. Of course, watch his channel. You'll want nothing more than for it to succeed. Greater reach, more interviews, more review copies, more. I always talk about, bookish influencers on YouTube. Usually I talk about them in the negative sense because usually they're kind of horror shows. But the science fiction world would benefit enormously. It would only be better if the more it involves Jonathan in its deliberations. Having him on a judging committee would be wonderful for a major science fiction prize. And I understand all of that. I agree with all that. I bridled about his points anyway, because a book reviewer has absolutely no obligation to the author. To the author's feelings? God help us. Do authors even have feelings? To the author's financial bottom line? Oh my God. A reviewer should absolutely not care whether or not a book sells, whether or not their review hurts sales. If you are reviewing a book and it's a gigantic pile of camel crap, you need to call it that so that your only obligation, don't waste time on it, or attention, or money. You're an advanced scout. The last thing in the world you want to do is you're an advanced scout. You come back to the main party. You don't want to hurt the feelings of the marauding orc band, so you don't mention them. Or there's an orc band out there, but they seem kind of friendly. No. Your job as a reviewer is to be an advanced scout. Your job is to inform the reader. You are not an ally of the author. Absolutely not. I might also point out here that in many cases, the kinds of things that Jonathan is talking about here, when he talks about not wanting to hurt the feelings of an author or not wanting to hurt the book, he says in his video that he wants every book to be a best-selling book. Bless him. And on some level, on a human level, I suppose we all do. But there are books and there are books. Quality level, talent of writing, that varies drastically from author to author. I don't necessarily want a bad book to be a best-selling book. But he mentions, when he's talking about examples like this in his video, I get the strong impression that he's largely talking about indie and self-published books, where you could know the author, where you could develop, where the author is paying close attention to every review, where they're willing to go on any channel, any podcast to help themselves. Getting word out about your book is the name of the game when you self-publish. A lot of self-published authors or indie published authors don't realize that when they go into it, and then they realize it. Once they're into it, they realize, oh, okay, I paid, money for an editor, money for a designer, money for a cover artist. I did all this. I had a launch party. I'm taking all the advice of all the webinars that I can get my hands on, and so I've come out with a finished product that looks really good, and it's dropped without a ripple. It's dropped like a stone. No one pays any attention to it because thousands and thousands of books are published every minute. So all of a sudden, critical attention becomes really important, and a lot of these indie and self-published authors know that, which is why a whole bunch of people on BookTube can befriend them. Right? You will see. We just the other day saw an indie self-published author who's sending around copies of his book, not to me, but to plenty of other booktubers. So it's kind of understandable to me that would be the case, that Jonathan would not want to hurt the bottom line of a book, would not want to hurt the feelings of an author. But I want to stress here that when we start doing that, especially for indie books, self-published books, we are reinforcing rather than erasing their ghettoization. The pernicious idea that is still true in mainstream publishing presses, in circles, is that indie and self-published books are not real books, right? Oh my God, I hear that every day, at least once, that those aren't real books, that it's not real publishing. And one of the reasons why that mistaken impression persists is if they're treated different from mainstream authors. No one in a million years would say, oh, well, John Scalzi has a new book out and I thought it was really bad. I'm not going to write a negative review of it because I don't want to hurt his feelings. No one would think that in a million years because he's a mainstream published author. Indie and self-published authors are playing in the same pool. They ought to be treated the same way. No special treatment because, every sale counts or any nonsense like that. And I was thinking that, and I was thinking of, hitting that a lot harder than I'm doing it right now. And then I realized something that is the key difference here, which is that Jonathan is not just a reviewer. As I mentioned, he's an interviewer. He's an ambassador. He might he does a lot of book reviews on his channel, and they're very good, but I think he clearly wants to be more than just that. I think he wants relationship with authors. Still assessing the books, but he wants everybody. He wants to be the rising tide that floats all boats, and that is a valuable thing. That's a worthwhile thing to want to be. That doesn't make you a sellout at all, but it does set your feet on a path that is not quite the same as just straight up book reviewing. Straight up book reviewing should be a buzzsaw. It shouldn't care about the raw material. It shouldn't care about the next book. It shouldn't care that, the author is a really nice guy and he does conventions and he's got a daughter on the way and this is, it's his third book and they're all self-published and he's trying to get the word out. That shouldn't matter. It should only be about the book. You as a reader are not going to know most of that in most cases. You're just going to come across this thing. I would say that it's even more valuable for indie publishing where there's such an ocean of stuff. There's an ocean of indie books, whereas mainstream science fiction and fantasy publishing, it's possible to read all of it in a year. If you wanted, if you did nothing else and you had the time, you could read all of that. All of it, all the stuff that comes out in mainstream fantasy and science fiction, like the top 5 publishers in either one of those genres, in the course of a year, you could read it all. But not the indie stuff, not the self-published stuff. No way. You'll only be able to read a fraction of what's out there. Considering that profusion, I think it's even more important to call balls and strikes rather than misserve your reader by softballing a book that's really not all that good. I don't see a whole lot of that on BookTube. I actually don't see Jonathan doing a whole lot of that. I understand where he's coming from because I think probably he is destined to be something much more than just a book reviewer. I just wanted to put my 2 cents out there because, well, a few people saw his video and asked me specifically, but I saw it myself and couldn't resist. I have been dealing with that kind of consideration. Oh, I know the author. for the whole of my reviewing career. No matter how careful you are bound to slip up once or twice in your life and get to know an author. It happens. It's not always pleasant, but it happens. That you sooner or later you're going to have an author over for wine and calzones, and that's just the way of it. It has to be, the understanding has to be that there's a separation between the person and the work. We talk about that on BookTube all the time anyway. Well, it's never sharper. It's never in sharper focus than in this particular situation. But I understand why. Jonathan would feel the way he does about some books. I think it's rather easily disposed of. I myself have never watched a review of his on his channel and come away thinking that was not trustworthy. That's never happened. Even when it's pretty clear that he knows the author, I still think the reviews are pretty trustworthy. I think it's easily dispensed with by informing the reader. Let the reader know. Tell the reader up front, I know this author. I'm going to do my best to give an objective assessment of the book. But I thought you should know ahead of time in case you just don't believe that. No matter how trustworthy you think I am, you just don't believe it's possible. You need to know that ahead of time to take my review with a grain of salt, essentially. I never do that myself in book reviews. I never make that announcement up front when I write a book review where I know the author. But I don't think you'd ever guess from my reviews. I don't think you'd ever have the question of maybe he's pulling punches because he likes this person. I don't think that my reviews ever give off that impression. So, because my reviews sometimes I'm not very friendly. But anyway, I'll leave a link to Jonathan's video. I want to know what you all think of this, because this is no longer, in the age of BookTube and Goodreads and Amazon, this is no longer as explicitly an us versus them thing. I bet a lot of you review books. You might do it in, well, again, I'm not meaning it to sound negative, but you might do it in an amateur way on Goodreads or on Amazon. But I bet you do it. I bet you make a point of doing it. So you have skin in the game. Where do you come down on all of this? I'm pretty sure that all of you would agree, about the spoiler business. Pretty sure that all of you would agree that ruining a surprise twist in a book that's been carefully crafted by an author just because you can is the act of a child. It's the act of a bratty little child. But what about the rest of it? Specifically reviewing books when you know the author. What a question. As indie and self-published books have flooded BookTube, and booktubers have become indie and self-published authors, that becomes more and more of a porous question. Just fascinating to me. Where do you come down on all of it? I'll leave a link to Jonathan's video, and you know where I stand. I'd love to know where you stand. So anyway, this is a bit of a response video. I'll wrap this up for now, and I'll be back. Thank you, BookTube.